This video is not intended to encourage or glorify any kind of drug use. The sole purpose of these videos is to educate you on the dangers of what these substances can do to you. Please do not do any of the acts mentioned in this video. I repeat, do not do any of the acts mentioned in this video.
Welcome to the world of Tales from the Trip.
What I have done may be stupid and was a dumb decision to make, but what is done is done. One day after shopping with my parents, I grabbed a plastic shopping bag from the back of my car, stuffed it in my pocket, and proceeded to have a normal day up until 10 p.m. At 10 p.m. I was drinking alcohol, not alone though. I had a friend over, let's call him W. About 4 shots of liquor, and after 20 minutes, I was feeling tipsy. I then had another 6 shots to have fun. W was sober, and we just talked about life. It was a cool and rainy night. The rain was loud on the roof, which drowned out the sound of our conversation, so my parents couldn't hear us. My alcohol was stored for an occasion where I wanted to get shit-faced drunk and fucked up. I was drunk, really drunk. Everything was lagging and in slow motion, as I felt every aspect of my physical body suppressed by the alcohol. I was in the bedroom with W, and I was thinking of what to do while I'm feeling drunk. I didn't want to do any activities like watching movies or playing video games because I don't enjoy them sober, so I wouldn't enjoy them drunk. I was bored and remembered the plastic shopping bag I had. I had recently been to a college class where the topic of inhalants was brought up for some reason. The teacher handed me a book called A Retailer's Response to Inhalants, and it was a book talking about how people sniff and inhale substances such as glue, paint, and even petrol, and the book even mentioned that it causes hallucinations. After reading this, I was instantly intrigued. I told W everything, and at the time I didn't know he was knowledgeable about inhalants. W, being sober and bored, encouraged me to try it. Being 18 with no connection to dealers and nothing other than alcohol, said fuck it, let's try something new. It was about 11:30 p.m. or something when we snuck out the bedroom and got out of the house. My dad had a gasoline can in a tray outside of his shed. I had noticed it before, and now I wanted to try it for the sake of a new experience. It might be fun, or at least give us something to do while we stay up, so I had the plastic shopping bag in my hand, and W followed me giggling through the rain, and we had to use a flashlight because it was so dark. W started hyping up what we were about to do, try inhalants for the first time. He said, I have heard of people huffing inhalants, and they had a crazy 3-minute high that is unlike any drug they did. We got to the gas can in the tray outside the shed, and now that we were here, I gave W the flashlight. He started preparing the plastic shopping bag for huffing, and I unscrewed the cap of the gas can, let it hang loose, and peered into the large half-empty gas can. I asked W how much we should pour in, and he said about 1/4 of the can. I picked it up. It was not too heavy, but when I picked it up, I brought it to my chest and hugged it with both arms because I wanted to. The cap was unscrewed and I smelt the gasoline strongly and was thinking how excited I am to hallucinate, even though I am doing an inhalant, which after the events of the story took place, I learned is one of the worst types of drugs you can do. I had this thought before pouring what I thought was almost half a liter of gasoline in the plastic shopping bag. I put the gas back down. I sat on the cold, slightly wet floor outside the shed with the rain coming down and it being too dark to see outside of the flashlight beam. W took one sniff from the bag. He stuck his head in, breathed once, and then came back out. He said he felt the gas go into his nose and burned it, but he also felt lightheaded like he just hit a vape. He passed me the shopping bag. At this point, gasoline was dripping from the bottom of it. I made sure not to get any on my clothes. I held it by the neck of the back, as I like to call it, and impulsively stuck my head in the bag and took a few deep huffs through my mouth. And after I took my head up from the bag, my lungs felt warm and I could feel the nasty tasting solvent fumes leave my mouth and lungs. It was at this point things started to change. My vision starts to gain effects. For one, a heat shimmering type visual over everything. The contrast of my colors go up. Everything is dark apart from the flashlight. W looks like a tall, dark figure looming over me. Every object in my vision seems to be moving slightly in and out of position. I stuck my head back in the bag and kept huffing. I took 6 huffs, and when I finished huffing, I looked up and W said, "You've had your face down in that bag for 20 seconds. Are you okay?" As I lifted my head from the bag, my frame rate drops. A numbing buzz fills my head, and it seems like the effects of the alcohol are getting stronger. I see flicks and flickering of faint visuals. Hard to make out what colors they were, but they were defining my visual field. There was a loud ringing noise in my eyes. I start to feel an intense tingling feeling in my back, almost in my bones, and it spread to my head, and the warm, pleasurable effects came on harder. It felt like my body and the sound I was hearing was stretching and shrinking. I yell out to W that the trip has started. My vision is swirling, like the flashlight being shown on me feels like it's encompassing my being, and the particles in the air which were thin lines that were moving all over. I thought I was stationary, but my mind was fucked. I tried to form a sentence, but I just started making weird noises and babbling. I was making very jumbled and slurred sentences to W, but I could not speak any straighter. I felt euphoric and was hallucinating. The audio hallucinations consisted of sound stretching and sounding further away, and a humming buzzing sound that just got louder and louder. The visual hallucinations were that everything was blurry, and the heat shimmering type visual to it as if it was moving slightly in and out of position. The tingling in my brain was so intense and pleasurable, I just wanted to get higher and higher. All I wanted was to keep huffing, so I did. I stuck my head back in and huffed the gas bag for a long time. I took 9 huffs from it, and this is where I started to lose control and function. I stopped laughing. W grabbed the bag from me and said, "You've been huffing too much. You could pass out from lack of oxygen," according to him. After this, my eyes went wide open, and he was of course still shining the light on me. My brain went blank after that. I forgot where I was and what I was doing, just staring at the waving, shimmering floor. Then the high-pitched buzzing sound morphed into what I thought were whispers and deep voices telling me that this is heaven. The voices said if you want to stay, keep huffing. These voices were loud and I started bugging out, fell back on the concrete, started drooling, and I thought my eyes were rolling into the back of my head, which they were as W pointed it out. At this point, I think he didn't want me to have a bad experience, so he refrained from calling the emergency number. W told me, "You're going to be fine," which I heard in a slow and somewhat distorted voice. I recognized his voice though over the loud ringing sounds and other voices in my head. I closed my eyes overwhelmed. I felt uneasy and my brain had a hard time thinking about anything in fact. I saw a fully white and gray light covering my vision, and there were small individual particles that were moving slightly in all directions, with different shades of gray across a semi-bright background. I tried to move but could not. I was still either tripping or zoning out. I eventually moved my legs and slurred some crap to W, and I didn't even know what I said. I was a little fearful and uneasy. I moved my arms but couldn't feel my body as if it was normal. My body just felt numb and way different. The ringing noises were slightly quieter now, but the visual hallucinations were going strong. W told me, "Let's go, no more for now," and grabbed my hand which felt numb. He tried to get me to stand up, but I fell on my ass, which happened in slow motion and my head was pounding. He left me for 10 minutes, took the bag of dripping gasoline with him. The hallucinations slowed down, became more subtle, and I felt a little less delirious. I still felt numb and didn't move at all and observed the ringing noises and visual drifting effects until W returned without the bag. He grabbed me by the arms and attempted to stand me up, which I could manage, but not without stumbling. He walked with me to the house and I stumbled there like a severely inebriated person. W said to me, "You had an intense trip and I want to give some to my other friends. I wrapped 3 towels around the bag and I'm going to take it to a party, maybe sell it or at least huff with friends if they want it." I could not make sense of this, but somehow remembered in my stupor. I stumbled through the door, crashing into it and making noise. I was wet and collapsed on the bed, feeling intoxicated and numb. No more hallucinations, but it was at this point I could speak again and told W I would like to try inhalants again for the intense rush it gave me. I had no access to other drugs apart from alcohol and solvents at this point. W had to leave the next day. I waited until the next time my parents were away, and beforehand I went to the mall to get a bag. When I was home alone, it was daytime, and I snuck to the shed and repeated the same foul method W did, with the gasoline dripping from the bottom of the shopping bag. I did it again sitting on the grass, so when the gas drips from the bottom of the bag, it won't be evidence to my parents. Yeah, right. I took 4 deep huffs, and the trip started again. The visuals were certainly better during the day. I enjoyed the hallucinations for a bit until my older brother rocked up in his car. He was 19 and I was 18. While I was huffing the gas, I could not make out any features of his face, and everything was moving like a liquid, and he asked why I was reeking of gasoline. I slurred something, and my brother responded with, "You know huffing can cause brain damage. It can make you a vegetable." He took the gasoline bag from me, and I was slurring a little bit, but I put all my concentration into demanding back the drug and told him it's my choice and I can do whatever I want. He looked shocked and upset and handed me the disgusting dripping bag back. I begged him not to tell my parents I was huffing. He said he wouldn't, but I would have to hide it. He left me to my business and went inside. I was more than a little stressed by the encounter and scared about my parents potentially finding out. I wanted to keep huffing. I took a few small huffs and didn't do too much because I didn't want to stop functioning and pass out. I observed the liquid shimmering trees, and after I sobered up again, I threw it in the trash. Next time I plan of huffing, I will stick my nose in the can, but if my addiction continues, it will get harder and harder to hide what I am doing. I took a shower after, and later in the day my parents noticed I was slower than usual and had delayed responses like everything was harder than it was before because I could have killed a few brain cells. My emotions felt a bit more deadened, and I don't have much desire other than to consume alcohol and inhalants. It took me 2 weeks to write up this report and 1 week to fix up the spelling mistakes. I eventually realized many people think inhalants are dangerous, and even though they can be scary, I just hate being sober and honestly don't know what will happen to me in the next few months. Will I get brain damage from solvent abuse, and will I ever function without inhalants or alcohol ever again? It was the start of the day, around 10 a.m. I was out of weed, and I proceeded to get bored and didn't know how to spend my day. So I took my dog out on a walk and stumbled upon a gas can full of gas. At this point, I had only huffed gas one other time, and I didn't feel much effect, so I thought, what harm could it do to take 1 or 2 huffs? I took a big breath of the gasoline chemicals and didn't feel anything, so I proceeded to huff 2 more times. Then I realized I heard a loud ringing that wasn't stopping. I decided it was nothing until I noticed my mouth went numb and that I started drooling. I brushed it off and took a few more huffs. I hesitated before I picked up the gas can though, but I did it anyway. As I took the last huff, I felt as if I was on pills, and I felt myself start to pass out. So I put the gas can down, and now, along with the loud ringing, I heard what sounded like a lawnmower, but I kept hearing it over and over again, as if someone put a reverb effect on it. I started imagining what my future would be like and how the past was shaped for my future, all at once, until the ringing and the lawnmower sounds got even louder and drowned out my thoughts. As soon as I snapped back to reality, it felt as if I experienced that in seconds, yet at the same time, it felt as if I was stuck in that loop for hours. When I looked at my dog, I felt as if she knew what I was doing, so I picked up the gas can which was lying on its side on the ground. I didn't remember putting the gas can down. In fact, I barely remembered I huffed the gas in the first place. I was out of good weed and I wanted a psychedelic high. I am 16 and have used weed, DXM, DPH, coke, and shrooms before. I was underestimating the high you'd get from huffing gas, so I said, what could go wrong? I was in for a rude awakening. I started huffing and it tasted like shit. I didn't feel anything, so I kept huffing and huffing till I started to feel a vibration in my skull. It was the best feeling, but I didn't see anything, so I huffed more until I heard a loud beeping in the background. I grabbed my dog's leash and started walking. Everything was morphing, and I could only see patterns in the weeds and gravel around me. I walked until I got to the road that divides my grandparents' house and mine, and then what I saw is still confusing. I saw 4 red pixels with different shades and around 12 yellow pixels with different shades. The red pixels were moving clockwise, and every time it moved, I felt my body getting swung around. I was only there for a little bit until I realized I had my dog with me still. The red pixels turned green. I was moving down into the right, and it opened up, and I was back on Earth. I grabbed my dog's leash and walked home as a song that I don't know but is strangely familiar started playing in the background. Somehow I was singing it perfectly. I walked in my house and everything went back to normal. I realized when I was in that 16-bit world that I fell over and was just rolling around on the ground. I had bruises and cuts on my body, and I'm still trying to figure out the whole trip. Though it was short, it was the strongest trip I have ever had. There was a point in my life a few months ago where I would constantly drink and smoke weed, all the basic things. But there came a point where my only source of such things moved away, and I was left with no options due to the fact that I'm 18. I lived in a very small town in Iowa, which makes the possibility of getting a buzz insanely low. I huffed gasoline a couple of times. It would mostly be me just sitting there taking breaths in through a gas can with a rag over it. I would do this for about 20 minutes for a decent high. I could feel the brain cells dying, but it felt too nice for me to care. The abuse potential for something like this, inhalants, is absolutely insane. One reason being no matter how many huffs you have taken, no matter how much you do, there will be virtually the same amount as when you started. At this point, I know that the cost is your brain. This one night, I came home from a stressful day at work, and I wanted to do anything that would get me messed up. I immediately knew that the only option for me would be the gasoline. It sounds fucking insane, but it was just my mindset at the time. I went out into the garage, popped off the spout of the gas can, put the rag over the hole, and started huffing. Phase 1. I felt the warm sensation going throughout my body, and I started hearing the faint whew. I got this every time I did it. I was watching Instagram reels, and the words and music I would hear would replay and play back. I suppose those can be considered auditory hallucinations. Phase 2. As I started huffing more intensely, faster, and deeper into my lungs, I started to get out-of-body visualizations. I could begin to physically see my own self, my face, over the can taking breaths. The sounds I was hearing before started getting louder. This is where I went into a very, very intense psychedelic state. Phase 3. I can still remember a good portion of it. Besides the tongues I was hearing, a lot of what I was hearing only made sense at the time. But this is the point where I physically stood up and leaned against this barrel full of yard tools. Shortly after, losing the ability to move. I guess it was some sort of catatonic state. I immediately was fully immersed in the sensation that I reached the end of the line, that I was seconds away from hell. I saw a static void that I was barreling toward, that I knew for a fact would burn my soul for an eternity with the worst possible pain in any single plane of existence. This felt like my entire reality in that moment didn't look like fire, lava, or any of that, just a static void. I heard voices that were antagonizing me and laughing, yet I felt so alone. It was absolutely the most frightening experience my mind could even fathom. It felt like every single being in the world was watching. Things I didn't think had a mind or ability to perceive suddenly had the ability to think and perceive, such as the garage door, the floors, walls, ceilings, etc. And the actual meaning to this whole existence was just for me to fall into an abyss for these beings to watch and enjoy, and have them say, "Finally, he's cornered. Nowhere to go. You're at the end of the line, you fucking loser." Throughout all this, I was saying, "What the fuck? What the fuck?" It had an echo with it, as if I was in a cave or something. I just accepted it, as horrible and terrible as it is. I was that puzzle piece on the bottom right corner of the quadrillion pieces that compose the universe. I was going to be tormented for all of eternity, and I've never comprehended that word so well up until then. Phase 4. As quick as it came, I saw the regular state of surroundings fade back. I again had the ability to move, and in a pure rush of adrenaline, I subconsciously realized that this may be a chance for a second chance in life. I dove under the garage door that was open by only 2 feet, and I sprinted down the sidewalk screaming, "Is this real? Is this real?" Throughout all of this, nobody came out of their house to see what was happening. I was convinced there was a portal that I opened in that very corner of the garage, and if I went back near it, I'd be yanked into it. Maybe on a spiritual level I did in some sort of way, but in the physical world, I was just some dude that went in absolute psychosis for a solid 10 minutes. That subconscious thought of me having a second chance floated to the surface of my mind. I settled with the fact that this was likely me almost dying, and that I in fact did almost end up dying and falling into some sort of hell due to stupid actions. I realized I left my phone in there. I was deadass so terrified I would have probably called 911 on myself if I did have it. So glad I didn't. This experience literally left me shook, and it is traumatizing to think about, but it woke me up, and I haven't done any sort of thing since, not even weed. I recovered back to my normal state of mind. Luckily, I do good in school still and perform fine in general. Do not do inhalants. Many are not as lucky. For the sake of your potential and God himself, just get drunk if you really want to get messed up. Though it's not the greatest, it surely is better than what goes into a car.